Hey everybody, Yvonne Williams here with Back to Earth Creations, and in this video we're going to be making some face like cabochons kind of. I'm using glow-in-the-dark Sculpey polymer clay, and we're going to start off by just kind of kneading and conditioning it, rolling it and folding it until it's nice and warm and well distributed. You can kind of see here, not very well, but kind of that it glows. And I'm going to use a spritz bottle of water to just very generously kind of dampen the silicone mold. There'll be links to all of the tools and materials used here down in the video description below, so that should help out. And I'm kind of just smushing it in there. I want it nice and evenly distributed. You don't want to put in too much clay into the mold. And then I'm gently pressing from the back side, kind of around the edges of the face. That way I don't smush the nose. But that's how it comes out. And then I made a bunch of them. Practice makes for progress, for sure. So now, before baking, I'm going through, and I have an odd assembly of like gears and cogs and beads and different watch parts and things. These are actually little like lock gears, I think might be what they're called. And then I'm using this rubber-ended tool to shape the eyes and just kind of decorate them however you like. I don't recommend painting the face during this kind of damp stage where it hasn't been baked yet, or uncured, or whatever you want to call it. But it is an excellent opportunity to kind of smush in some different things and to tweak the sculpting. Here I'm using some ball tools, ball styluses, to do a little bit of shaping and molding. And I just wanted to give you a general idea of how I take these different watch parts and kind of shape them to fit the face a little bit better. Each one comes out so unique because it's very rarely will I find the same exact different little parts and pieces and things. Because I get like these mixed kits off of Amazon and stuff of different watch guts, kind of, and just decorate the faces in that. This is the most editing I've ever done in a video, by the way. But I spent a lot of time kind of browsing and fiddling and trying on different pieces to see what I liked and what I didn't like, and then I edited it down to show you guys just kind of what I ended up going with. But there was a lot of experimentation that went into finding which pieces I liked where. But this would have originally been almost a 3-hour long video, and so I was able to get it whittled down. But use your creativity, your inspiration. Just kind of try pieces on and see what works. And the first couple might be a bit weird, but you'll get the hang of it. You'll find what you like. I like to fill in some of the emptier spaces with smaller gears. Then another thing that you could do is you could take, like here I have just a large gear charm, and I'm just smushing part of it into the clay of the face. If your clay is quite smushy, you can pop it into the freezer for a little bit, and that will firm it up without like having to have baked it. So you can still like press things into it, but it won't distort as easily. Now here I've got a little tray of like really fine watch parts, like teeny tiny little gears and knobs and things. And I found a bunch of them that looked very similar and decided to do a little bit of a, almost like rivets down the side of this face, which is pretty fun. And you can do it just with your fingers, or you could use a tweezer, whatever tool of preference. So much of what I do with art is more about the end result and less about how you get there, even though it's the getting there that's so fun. I'm using, sometimes when my fingernails are longer, they get in the way, and so don't hesitate to use the ends of tools. Like there, I just used the end of a tweezer to kind of push that in, and that's how that one came out. And again, I'm just doing the same thing to this other one with some different watch parts and beads. Now here, though, I do have little pieces of the antique gold polymer clay that I've torn off and rolled into little balls. And I'm just kind of placing them across the forehead. You could do this wherever you wanted. Again, I more wanted to show you out of a concept of teaching you the technique, and then you can take these techniques that I'm doing and apply them to whatever you can think of. I use a real short-handled screwdriver, Phillips head, to do an imprint into the largest circle, and then I use a small, like a eyeglass repair, kind of very small screwdriver to do just a nice little into the heads of the screws. Well, into the little balls to make them look like the heads of screws. And that just, I don't know, that made me really happy. And again, like, that's just an antiqued brass rondel or copper rondel. And I'm using the edge of that same gear I used earlier to kind of just do like a little train track almost of just texture. You can use the end of a ball stylus to shape the eyes. That's something I was never quite satisfied with, just the way that the mold made the faces look. So I like to go through and kind of give them all a little bit of individuality and personality. And that's how a couple of them came out. Now I come through with just a nude palette of eyeshadow, but it's a very highly pigmented matte shadow. You could use, I recommend whatever you use, have it be highly pigmented, because the chalky powder will build up and the eyeshadows won't stick as much. But it doesn't have to be matte though. I've used lots of shiny stuff to great effect before. Using a variety of different paintbrushes to kind of buff and shine and sparkle and layer and just, experiment again, find what works. A lot of the same techniques that are used for face painting or contouring or like beauty makeup can also be used for painting and doing makeup basically on the faces of these cute little polymer clay cabs. Because you could take these and you could turn it into a pin. You could use it like you would a cabochon or a bead to wire wrap around. And right now I'm just putting on her eyeliner. The one there in the middle I made look a little bit more like a cat. Just doing her eyeshadow. And on the one to the farthest right that I'm currently working on, I just dry brushed some eyeshadow onto the detailing over the cheeks that I achieved with a rubber stamp. So those were just a couple. I was really pleased with how they came out though. Like, I'd love to see what y'all do. Now here, I'm using some super teeny tiny tiger's eye gemstone cabochons. These are real gemstones. And just kind of pressing them very firmly into the polymer clay. And then I used my finger to kind of shape it up around the stones. Using my fingernail to just scrape out, there was a little bit of a dirty spot, blended it out with a ball stylus and then my finger. And there was so much of this project was kind of fiddling with and tweaking and perfecting just little details. Moving on to another piece, you could use a needle tool to do some pretty cool little like gash effects. I wanted to do one that was a little bit of like a Frankenstein jigsaw puzzle kind of face. And then just extending the line of her mouth out to the sides just a little bit more. Removing the excess clay from the tip with my hands. Again, just kind of deepening that line for what I do think turned out to be a pretty nice effect. And then I go through with, this time I'm using a slightly shimmery black eyeshadow to fill in some of the lines. And then I do like doing her eyebrows. I love doing the eyebrows and makeup on these little faces. It really brings me a lot of joy. And then doing just a little bit of contouring into the crease of her lid if her eye had been open. If that makes sense, it's makeup talk, I feel like. But just kind of, again, adding just a little bit more shape. Now I'm coming back to this one because I didn't like it with just the gemstones. Like, I felt like she needed more. So I decided to experiment with carving into the clay what I would have possibly originally just painted on. So this became difficult for me because the clay gets goopy and pulled and, doesn't quite behave. So definitely warrants a little bit of experimentation. But it was a lot of fun. Made some little dots and holes and swirls and textures, and I don't know. You never know until you try something how it's going to work out. And it certainly might not work out the same every time either. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, I don't know. I could do carving on it like this maybe, and then possibly after baking, sand it down or buff it down to kind of even those lines out a little bit more. Because I just felt like whenever I was carving in, it got a little too much of a pucker around where I was using the needle tool. Now here I'm using some Folk Art brand Color Shift in a couple of different colors throughout the rest of the video. And I just wanted to just use a little bit off of the lid. So I'm using clean, fine detailing brushes. And here the faces have been baked at this point. I baked them in just a regular old toaster oven for about 30 minutes at 275 degrees. And I baked them on a ceramic tile. And I just went through and darkened down the makeup. I'm adding in a couple of little dots on her. Now here I'm that imprint that we did previously with the gear. I'm coming through and I'm just kind of darkening in, and then with a damp finger buffing off the excess off the surface. Really like that one. Now here I have just some of that same acrylic paint, but I'm pushing it on very thickly and then using a damp tissue to buff it off of the surface of the baked clay. And I felt like that really brought out a lot of the details, darkened it in the line of her mouth as well as the line of her eyes. Just boop, just a little bit more. Now, practicing on these faces really made me want to experiment a little bit with doing like face-ups on like Monster High dolls. Like I think I really want to try that. But I don't have any Monster High dolls, nor do I have any of the stuff to do that, I don't think. So and that is something too that anytime I'm trying out something new, I like to do a big batch of it because it's like having a crash course in something. So with this one, I was doing 10 faces. That's very quickly I take what I learned from one and apply it to the next. Oh, this purple's my favorite. I love this purple with that purpley blue shift. So good. Now, something that I definitely learned that I think I talk about a little later as well is it's really important to let your layers of acrylic paint dry, because otherwise it just starts wiping itself off. And that's something, like you can see, there's a little bit of pigment removal from trying to do a bunch of layers. Now this one I go through and I'm using just a coffee bean brown, just gooping it all over the face, trying to get it down into all those little nooks and crannies and details. And then again, using here I'm using just a damp washcloth. Like I dampened down a little corner of it and I'm just buffing it off because the tissues I was using disintegrate pretty easily, so a washcloth held up pretty well. And then change hand position and layer it back on there, and that has a kind of nice effect. It makes me think of like carved bone, maybe a little bit, of how it settles into the details. But I decided to darken down, and I did let the acrylic paint that I had applied dry, at least a little. But I'm going through with that Color Shift black again, which is like black with a really nice like golden bronze shimmer to it, and just darkening in all the carving lines. I added some dots, and now I'm giving her some lime green eyeshadow because I love that color, and it makes me super happy. And then I'm also shading in the outer corners of the eyes with some black. So now on this one, I wanted to give her a little bit of, at the time of recording, it's that time of year. So sugar skulls, because Halloween, that's what time of year it is, at least currently. And I love the Day of the Dead celebrations and just the whole aesthetic and the family orientation of the holiday. Like Halloween to me is so much more than dressing up as in cool costumes and having a ton of fun and candy and stuff. It's very much the beautiful autumn before the quiet death of winter takes over. And so the sugar skulls are just that, they symbolize a lot to me. So I did a little bit of shading and contouring on the forehead, eyelids, and cheekbones, to accentuate. And then I'm actually darkening in the nose here. I actually, for those of y'all who follow me on Instagram, a few days prior to recording, I had done some sugar skull makeup on myself for the first time and had a blast. So of course I'm like, you're gonna be a pretty sugar skull. Happy little sugar skull cabochon. Again, contouring in, just kind of feathering out some of that paint to get it to, this one was on a little too thick, so I dabbed it off a bit with the washcloth and tried again. Giving her a nice wide smile. Darkening in the lines. And also, as much as I enjoyed making these and as pleased as I am with them, I learned so much, and I very much look forward to the next batch that I do. Trying to give her some little lashes. I think I could have done with maybe a finer bristled brush or something. Doing the outline of the darkness around the eye sockets. On both sides. And again, it's a bit of a pain having to wait for everything to dry before doing more layers. Hey, kitty. But worth it though. And then time for the little humps around the eyes. With the sugar skulls, the magic definitely happens in the details, because otherwise you kind of look like a poorly drawn skeleton face. But once you start putting on those layers of detail, it's like, oh, I see what you did there. I did a couple of little petals and just some dots on the chin. And then time to fill in the forehead with the very quintessential kind of spider web. I really like that look. I've also seen some that I really admired that had like roses and stuff on the forehead, but I didn't quite feel up to painting some roses. But yeah, so there she is. Pretty pleased with that one. Now, I did go ahead and let her dry all the way before adding in another layer of this color shift teal, just to add a little bit of splash of something else to it. So up next, we're going to be glazing them with the Polymer Clay Safe PIM 2. Be sure to do this in a well-ventilated area. I was outside and using a respirator. Okay, y'all, so we're back from outside. I sprayed 3 coats of the PIM, the Preserve Your Memories 2 that I get from polyclayplay.com. And you can see that's given us a really nice kind of varnish. Like, I mean, it's not super glossy, but it's not full-on matte either. This is unvarnished, and this is varnished. So you can see this is like almost completely matte, whereas this does have a nice little shine to it. But what makes it really great is now I can rub and rub and rub. And that stuff, it's not coming off. You know, the powder pigments not coming off. So I learned quite a bit doing this set of faces, and that's something that I really feel like whenever I'm trying something new, I do it in a big batch. That way I can learn immediately from what I learned from this face will tide over into that face, will tide over into that face, and like kind of into the next and into the next. And so it's a very intensive crash course, and that's kind of how I like to teach myself new things. Gosh, which one was the first one that we did? This one was it? I know that these 3 were the first ones that we had done, and I had actually ended up going back through and touching up. I actually used, oh, where's it at? This, because it's a glue that I had directly on hand, to, I intentionally popped out some of the gears and put this very lightly, just a dab, into where the little gear would indent into, and that way I feel more like it's going to be more secure. I would have used super glue, but I don't know if any of y'all have noticed, but sometimes whenever you use a super glue, it can leave like a chalky outline around something. I'm just pointing here to be like, there's no super glue there. But this did not leave any kind of chalky outlines around any of our work. You can see, especially here with all these open centered gears, I really didn't want to have to worry about any chalkiness. Another thing that I learned is that you can add water to acrylic paint to thin it down, and it like kind of paints better that way. I've always just used straight, thick, from the tube paint. It didn't even occur to me that you can add a touch of water to it and make it a little bit runnier and make it flow a little better. That's something that might seem obvious to people other than me, but I was like, what is this witchcraft? And I was thoroughly impressed, and I don't know why after 10 years of being a professional creator of things that I'm just now learning this, but better late than never. So if y'all have any other cool little tips or anything like that, I would love to hear them. Also, layers, 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 layers. So much to be able to get the nice, deep, bold black lines that I was really going for. I did 2 or 3 layers of the acrylic paint. Usually on the first layer, I'd do like a slightly watered down acrylic, just so that I get much smoother little floopies and little swoopies and bloops whenever it's watered down a little bit than I do whenever it's just straight pigment. But then I do like to go through and darken it up a little bit more. Also, I really like blending, kind of building up in layers. Also, you can see on this one especially, her eyeshadow is the end of me. It's very, very important, I found, to let your layers dry, which again, might seem really obvious to anyone other than me, but you get a much nicer effect whenever you let the layers dry. And again, I really liked the acrylic washes. Yeah, so that's kind of what I learned through this batch was to be patient, to let your paint dry. I don't know which one's my favorite. I have a tendency towards this one because I love her face. Like, I love it how it's like a steampunky 7 of 9 kind of. But it's just, I don't know, I'm very particular towards this one. This one probably has my favorite glow contrast because I didn't do anything but the straight polymer clay and the black layer of paint. So whenever this one's glowing, it's a complete inversion, and I think it looks really cool. This one's okay. I like this one all right. Also, that's another thing that I learned, is that with this one, I had tried to carve in some of the details, which adds like an interesting texture to it, but really, I think I'm happier. I think it looks cleaner not carving it in first and just painting the details on. But I highly recommend experimenting on your own and kind of seeing and going from there. Hey y'all, thanks so much for hanging out with me. I hope that this tutorial was helpful to you guys. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, I would love to hear from you. You can leave a comment down below. You can also, in the video description, there are links to all of my social media. So if you want to like share pictures of what you make on Facebook, or if you want to tag me in a picture of something that you've made on Instagram, or if you just want to follow me and keep up to date with all the antics and things that we're doing behind the scenes here at Back to Earth Creations, you can find us down below. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, did I already say that? I don't know. But yeah, I do love hearing from you guys, and if you have any requests, we're getting up into a slightly slower part of the year. At the time of recording, it's October, and November, December, and January are kind of our slow part of the year for our traveling schedule, so that really opens up a lot more time for me to focus on our videos more. So that way I can definitely start popping out some more specific, maybe more intricate, maybe more simplistic videos. I want to hear from you guys what you want to see. But yeah, I think this one's my favorite. If you enjoy my free tutorials and would like to support the creation of more of them, as well as participate in our fairy house giveaways and our digital download content that y'all can get, our monthly craft crates, exclusive behind the scenes pictures and stuff, please check us out on Patreon. Again, there's a link down below, and pledging even just $1 does so much to keep our production going because it takes quite a bit to do a video a day. And it also funds our artisan education program that I do at conventions, where I go and I provide all the tools and materials and teach hands-on workshops to whoever shows up. So that's always really fun to kind of give you all that hands-on environment. And I know I really enjoy it, and I learn a lot from you guys whenever you show up to my workshops. So thank you guys so much again for hanging out with me, and happy crafting. Bye.